Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In the case of YouTube and Facebook, make sure you hit that notification button. That way you'll be notified as soon as we go live, and then you can participate in the live chat as the program is going on. Also, make it a point to visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It is the place to go to get all of your Pro 2A swag. I'm talking T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies. I mean, you name it. It's all right there. It's all right there at fpcgear.com. And the best part about it is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right. Let's talk a little 2A history, in particular in the state of California. You know, there's this little thing that we have here in the state of California known as the Mulford Act. This was a piece of legislation that was passed initially, which basically ended loaded up open carry in the state of California. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it because, well, there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, in general about why the Mulford Act was created, who supported the Mulford Act, and what the reasonings behind the Mulford Act actually were. So I wanted to actually kind of address a little bit of that. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about, well, you know, what started or what made the Mulford Act start? Well, it all started, well, with the Black Panthers. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense here in the state of California was an organization that was started during the Civil Rights Movement in order to advocate on behalf of black people, not just in the state of California, but nationally. But there was a little program, one of the many programs that actually was started there by the Black Panthers that raised the ire of a number of folks, in the city of Oakland. And here's a little bit about that particular program.
In 1966, California law allowed civilians to carry loaded weapons as long as they were not concealed, as do many states today. And the newly formed Black Panther Party took advantage of the law.
The California Penal Code Section 12020 through 12027, and also the Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
Huey said we're going to carry our guns and we're going to follow the police. And if they stop someone, we're going to stop. We're going to maintain a legal distance. And we're going to observe these so-called law officers in the performance of their duty.
While you're coming around the corner, just stay facing the way you are.
We would stop. We would get out of the cars. We would walk up to the scene. Those who had rifles would carry them in the open, clearly visible.
We would stand at a distance where the police couldn't say they were interfering with their arrest or their detention of the individual, and make sure that there was no brutality.
The police were confronted by citizens who were not just voicing their opinions, but were armed.
So this was really kind of the impetus of it. This is what really what really started the push forward for the Mulford Act. This guy, the guy in the picture right here, Mr. Mulford, Don Mulford, was a Republican. He represented the county of Alameda. I don't know if the city of Oakland was in his district, but I do know that he was actually approached originally by law enforcement there in Alameda County, or I don't know if it was the Oakland Police Chief or the Alameda County Sheriff, but he was originally approached. In fact, there is a letter. Let me see if I can find it here for you. There's a letter that he sent to the governor basically outlining and talking a little bit about that. And he said here, once again, this legislation was specifically designed designed with the help of the National Rifle Association to protect our constitutional right to bear arms and yet to assist the law enforcement people who asked for this bill to do something about the armed bands of citizens who are walking around our public streets and our public places with loaded weapons. After you have read this bill, please analyze it. I hope that you will agree that this is good legislation, yet does not affect the right to protect yourself. Well, I'll first of all, I'll just take a little bit of exception in particular with the letter. See, keep in mind, now, you need to understand that in particular at this time, the NRA was not the gun rights association organization that we know of today. In fact, it was mostly about teaching people to shoot and about hunting. And that was largely why their main goal, or at least not their main goal, but the NRA's main goal, and I don't want to speak for the NRA, but was to protect hunters. And there was a lot of conversation around that time that it was all about making sure that you protect the hunters. In fact, this guy in particular right here, I don't know exactly who he is, but I do know that if you listen to his comments that were mentioned around the time, that once again, they're not even thinking about all law-abiding citizens. They're not thinking about all citizens. They're just thinking about, in this particular legislator's case, he's just talking about hunters. And the rest of us that may or may not want to defend ourselves in public, well, he has another perspective of exactly, who we are.
And these Black Panthers showed up some weeks ago at the airport to meet the Betty Chavez, the widow of Malcolm X, carrying the same things. And the only thing we could find to book them on then, and we couldn't book them, was if they had a live round in the breech and they were transporting guns around in automobiles. I submit to you it's preposterous. And in this urban society that we have in California, when we're fishing through the Fish and Game Code and looking at municipal fire ordinances to try and prevent people from carrying weapons around in an excited and hostile atmosphere. That scene over there yesterday, there were Cub Scouts milling around, there were children up to picnic with the governor. When this group met Saturday in Richmond, we took aerial shots of them from a helicopter, and the meeting is, they sealed off a block in Richmond with armed guards at each corner and with riflemen on the roof. In the midst of this meeting, and the pictures show it, there were children out on bicycles playing. I think we've listened to these people who are afraid of some kind of bureaucratic takeover of arms. We've got to emphasize again that no one wants to touch the legitimate hunter, but we've got to protect society from nuts with guns.
Now, keep in mind, I think it's important to understand that at this point, how the Black Panthers felt at this point. There were oftentimes, and this was not uncommon for law enforcement of that time, to utilize their position to intimidate. And I think it's easy to see that, the Black Panthers wanted law enforcement to they wanted them to get a little bit of taste of their own medicine, because not only did they now know that they were being watched and observed, but now they also knew they were being watched and observed by individuals with firearms, with loaded firearms. Now, what he was particularly talking about was you couldn't transport, at the time, you couldn't transport a firearm with a live round in the breech, which kind of makes sense because you don't want an accident to happen driving down the street with hit a bump and bam, all of a sudden something. Anyway, you guys get that. But the thing was that because these were individuals who were, once again, challenging law enforcement of the time to make sure that they weren't violating the rights of individuals, in the eyes of that particular legislator, they were seen as nuts with guns. And that's how they saw it. And quite frankly, he wasn't the only politician that some of us there are some politicians that we would look fondly on who shared his view of this particular situation.
Ridiculous way.
And these
ridiculous way to try and solve the problems that have to be solved among people of goodwill, and there's certainly nothing that can be done in the line of goodwill when Americans have guns with even the implied idea that those guns might be directed against other Americans. But I would think that some of the bills that have been suggested, such as not carrying a loaded weapon on a city street or in town, this might certainly be a good one. There is absolutely no reason why out on the street today civilians should be carrying a loaded weapon.
Okay, so basically what you have here is you have Ronald Reagan, who, he's famous for the picture of holding up the gun, being at the, supporting the NRA and supporting the Second Amendment. But here you have an individual who is specifically saying that, we don't need people on our streets with loaded firearms. You got to understand, and this is one of the dichotomies that I think in particular Republicans deal with. And that is this balance between security and liberty. And in many cases, you have many Republicans who are not necessarily civil rights minded when it comes to the Second Amendment. They see it as, well, I'm protecting my people. So they'll side with law enforcement. If law enforcement says we need this, when I say law enforcement, I'm specifically speaking to the higher up. I'm talking to the people who run the unions. I'm talking about the people who run the departments. I'm talking about, those folks. But if they come to these individuals and say, we need this in order to protect people, they're more willing, and they seem too often, and I don't say all the time, I won't say most of the time, I will say too often, they are willing to sell out the security or the liberty of some citizens for the perceived security of others. Let me say that again in case I messed up my words. They are willing to sell out the liberty of citizens in order to in their mind protect the security of other citizens or of all citizens. But you and I both know that's a false dichotomy. You never ever protect the security of individuals by taking away their liberty. It never happens. It never, ever, ever happens, and it is not successful. And we learn those lessons. And I believe that Ronald Reagan, by the time he would become president, would learn that lesson, as the Mulford Act was not the last piece of gun control legislation that would be passed in the state of California or passed throughout the country. That even he would start to see the sweeping changes when it came to, once they get that camel's nose under the tent, they're going to come for more. And once again, you can agree with the Black Panther Party, you can disagree with the Black Panther Party, right? But these were individuals who were actually exercising the purest definition, the most fundamental definition of the Second Amendment as they saw it. And that was protecting themselves from a tyrannical government.
The JFK assassination ushered in the most turbulent era in recent American history. As issues of race and class tore at the fabric of society, the Black Panthers and others turned to guns and the Second Amendment for protection, according to the former chair of the Black Panther Party, Elaine Brown.
We believe we had the right of self-defense against an occupying army, as we saw it, of police. So we decided that we weren't going to play the native people who tried to fight fairly with combat. We decided that the only way we could defend ourselves with the same weapons that were being used against us.
In early 1967, the Black Panthers organized armed patrols through the poorest neighborhoods of Oakland, California, an act that some call the beginning of the modern gun rights movement. At the time, California law permitted citizens to carry loaded weapons so long as they were visible. When the state legislature took up a bill to prohibit individuals from carrying loaded weapons, the Panthers, heavily armed, entered the state capitol to demonstrate for their right to bear arms.
And we all know how exactly that ended. That little venture into the state legislature, onto the floor of the California Assembly, would be the death nail. I mean, it would be the thing that would push the Mulford Act across the board, across the finish line, and become the law and end loaded open carry in the state of California. Since then, we've passed we've eliminated not just loaded open carry, but even unloaded open carry in the state of California is now illegal. And as many of you know, concealed carry is on a may issue basis, meaning local law enforcement makes the decision and they are not obligated to issue it. They have two requirements that they go by. One is of good moral character, which is for the most part people agree as that you're not a criminal, that you're not prohibited from owning or possessing a firearm, and you haven't been convicted of crimes including domestic violence crimes. But the other has to do with good cause, and this is where so many of these instances wind up getting skewed, because depending on which sheriff or which police chief you're talking to, good cause, the good cause standard is different. In some counties, like in Sacramento County or in Fresno County, the good cause is simply self-defense. In other counties with other sheriffs, it has to be that you are under imminent threat, meaning your life already has to be in danger for you to go through this long, extensive process to get a concealed carry permit. In some cases, you have to. Well, you have a lot of money. That's where a lot of them wind up getting it. And there's actually at least one county sheriff who's now doing jail time, and another county sheriff who is under indictment behind a scandal relating to people giving money. But in many cases, it was people who either have money or people who carry around a lot of money. In some cases, you have to have some sort of a connection to law enforcement. In fact, in Los Angeles County, it was deemed that all but about 9 or 10 of the individuals in LA County, and there's less than 200 in LA County, all about 9 to 10 of them had some sort of a connection to law enforcement or the justice system. They were either judges, retired cops, or whatever it was. But it's amazing how few average citizens, you and I, actually get to exercise our right to bear arms outside of the home. Now, you guys wondering, the reason why I include this picture is because I will tell you right now, most of the gun laws that they have passed, most of the gun laws that have passed in the state of California are not the sort of laws where they're going to actually be going out and actively enforcing them. Most of the gun laws that they've passed in the state of California are going to require an engagement between law enforcement and the citizen. And every study that we've seen show that black and brown young men are far more likely to have engagements or entanglements or come across law enforcement than anybody else. And so whether it's the Mulford Act, whether it's the end of open carry, whether it's the handgun roster, whether it's magazines, whether it's certain cities that ban certain ammunition, no matter what it is, those people who are going to engage or going to come across police officers more often are going to be the ones that are going to have these laws used against them. And that, my friends, is the thing we need to look at. We have a lot of folks out there talk about the war on drugs. Well, guess what? The war on guns is the new war on drugs. This is how they're going to continue, because folks, listen, they're legalizing drugs. They're decriminalizing drugs. But at the same time, they're increasing crimes and penalties for guns, for law-abiding gun owners. They're making it so difficult for you to keep up with and know firearms laws in order to be able to purchase a firearm. Just if you think I'm kidding, just think about this. You guys out there, I'm assuming if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're a gun owner and you're an active gun owner because you're involved in the issues because you're watching the show. Otherwise, why would you be watching the show? How many people do you know? How many people do you know who never bought a gun before, but they called you to get advice because they don't know what's legal and what's not? How many? Raise your hand if you've had at least one. All right, now raise both hands if you've had at least two. Now let me see a foot if you've had more than two. I'm not going to show you my feet. But you guys get the point. The thing is that this has always been, and understand that, the first gun control in California was about making sure that Native Americans couldn't purchase firearms or ammunition. Made it a crime to sell ammunition or firearms to Native Americans. And then you had in the 1920s, you had more gun control that was put in place, specifically targeting at the time, we call them Latinos, but at the time it was specifically Mexicans and Chinese. So, today would be Asians or API, and it would be and it would be Latinos. But you guys get what I'm saying. It was specifically made it so that you could not sell firearms or ammunition to them. And then you had the Mulford Act, which was all about making sure that the Black Panthers were disarmed and could not hold law enforcement accountable to make sure that they were not violating the rights of citizens of Black Americans. When I say that gun control has racist roots, in particular in progressive states like California and New York and other states like that, especially in those states. But then you can go right down to the South and you can look at the black codes. You can look at Jim Crow laws that once again made it illegal for even free black men to be able to own or possess firearms. The whole point of gun control is making sure that those people don't own or possess firearms. And the thing now, folks, is that right now, all of us law-abiding citizens who believe in liberty, who believe in what America stands for, we are all now those people. And because we are those people, if they want to interject or if they want to implement their agenda, the first thing that they've got to do is they've got to disarm us. Let's not let them do it. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.